Hey everybody, welcome to our brand new video series, Untraditional Industries, where we're going to be talking about untraditional industries. So who better to join us for one of our first episodes, Matt Zelasko with Renowned Creative, and we're going to be talking about boring industries.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Coming.
So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why we have you here to talk about these boring industries?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I am going to give you a little bit of an untraditional background in
Perfect.
me because I don't want to just give you some boring credentials and whatnot. So basically, I got into marketing in a path that is probably a little bit different than most folks take. Not to say that it's completely unique or that I did this on purpose in any way, shape, or form. But I got out of school and I still didn't really know what I wanted to do or be or why I wanted to do anything or anything like that. So I bounced around a lot. I took a lot of different jobs, just trying things out. And again, this wasn't purposefully or anything like that, but I learned a lot about just human nature and the way people make decisions and the way people make choices in a lot of different areas. So I worked in a lot of different retail stores. I worked at pizza places. I worked in warehouses. I worked in B2B sales, B2C sales. So really bounced around, really, like I said, kind of trying to find myself, but not really, just trying to survive and make some money and all of that fun stuff. And at one point I took a job and I ended up sort of helping this SaaS startup company who made an email marketing tool that kind of hooked on to marketing automation platforms like Marketo and HubSpot and Eloqua, Pardot, Acton, all the different things. And I really thought it was a cool industry. I thought it was really neat to be able to use all this technology. It was really right when, 2014, 2013, right when MarTech was blowing up. Scott Brinker does the big marketing technology landscape, and new logos just kept popping in because there was just so much out there, and it was really exciting. So I was like, I want to be a part of this. And by selling this product, I really learned the ins and outs of email marketing and inbound methodologies and everything else that goes along with that. Social media and account-based marketing was a big thing at the time, still sort of is. So I, like anyone does, you learn about it and you start trying it out and you start getting good at it. And at one point I realized that there was all of this technology and we were missing something, and that was the human aspect. And that's really where I come in, because I like to call marketing, this mix of science and creativity, and all of the marketing technology out there these days really misses that human element. And I like all of the data, I like all of the science behind marketing, but I also understand that people are irrational. People make decisions in illogical ways. What makes you decide to buy one brand instead of another? So that's really where I come in, and that's what I do at Renowned Creative. And that's me in a nutshell.
All right.
Cool. So obviously we all know here that there's so much content now. Content marketing was also a huge thing.
Yeah.
It's been a huge thing, and it's really hard for a piece of content to stand out because of that. So what's the argument to be made for still creating content, especially in very niche industries?
Sure. It's a good question. Personally, I think the fact that the landscape is saturated isn't really a good argument against it. I think it's actually an argument for it because there's so much out there. First of all, chances are your competitor's doing it. And I mean, there's 1.5 billion websites on Earth or on the internet. Would you ever start a business and say there's 1.5 billion websites? That's enough. I'm not going to do it, right? At this point, people, especially in boring industries, so B2B, and I don't mean boring as in, oh, this is really boring, but it's a niche industry. it doesn't need to be viral. It doesn't need to be really exciting content. It needs to be informational. You need to build that relationship with a prospect and give them something that solves a problem of theirs, and a lot of the time you're going to end up being rewarded. So I definitely think that there is an argument to be made.
Yeah.
So with a company, starting to get into that and wanting to, what are some resources that they should invest in to get started in content creation?
Sure. So I think the number one resource you already have, and that's just the information. It's your expertise. It's your knowledge. A lot of people, it goes back to the last question. There's so much out there, so people lack the confidence maybe to get started because they're, oh, well, everybody's already done this. There's people smarter than me that know more than me. It's that imposter syndrome that pops up in so many of us, where you think, I can't do it because somebody might find something wrong with this. I say, go for it, right? Now, obviously, there are a lot of things you need to know in order to properly help people find your content. So if it's a blog post, you need some SEO knowledge. You need to know how to distribute it on social media. If it's video, you need to, put it in the right places, the right channels. But ultimately, I think to get started, just think about the questions that your customers ask you almost every single time. There's always frequently asked questions, and write about that, expand on it, do videos about it. That way, especially, the questions that they're asking before they become a customer, but don't ignore the ones that they ask after they become a customer, because if you can turn that customer into an advocate for your brand, I think they're going to go out there and spread your message. And I mean, there's no better way to market yourself than to, through referrals. So.
Yeah, for sure.
So a lot of times the smaller companies who are more niche, they might not feel like they have enough time to create the content that they want to create. So they'll often turn to agencies like yours. What's the benefit to using an agency or producing the content in-house, or is it just not necessarily
Sure.
the benefit? You know what I mean?
Yeah, the differences.
Yeah.
So I think the differences are subtle, because at the end of the day, whether you hire an employee to create content for you or you hire an agency to create content for you, you're taking a risk either way, that it's either going to work out or it's not. I think obviously hiring an agency, it's easier to fire an agency than it is a person, right? But really, at the end of the day, it's still an investment in time from you, because you need to help that employee or that agency understand your business. They are going to need to interview you and talk to you about your product, your business, and everything else. They're going to have to get to know your customers, how your product works, all of that goes into it. I think if you have the resources to hire a whole department, I think that's great. I think you definitely need to make sure that you have the time, or the need to not only train all those people, the time to train all those people, and the need to create enough content to keep all of those people busy for 40 hours a week, year over year. There's nothing worse than hiring a whole department, and this happens a lot more than I think a lot of people realize. They hire a whole marketing department with video people and designers and front-end developers, and then they get a bunch of projects done, and then they're like, well, now we don't need any of you guys, and then there's people, and that's not really a great look for your company. So there's the benefit there, but I think it's really just a case-by-case scenario. I think one really great way is to have a marketing director and then outsource the bits and pieces of it. And if it's something that you start realizing that you're going to do a lot of, start investing in that in-house. But there is also something to be said about having people that aren't in your daily culture. They can literally, they care less about your product than you do. Nobody's ever going to care more, you know what I mean? So they can view it from an outsider's perspective, and I think that's really valuable.
Yeah.
So there's pros and cons to each.
Yeah.
So, off script here, hopefully it's fine, but so when talking about boring industries and everything, like we fit into that category. I always felt like we fit into that category since we opened. And a struggle that I had myself when we were starting is how do you make marketing material for debt collection software? No one's going to read this. No one cares about this. This isn't flashy like.
Some people do.
Yeah. So, like, what would you? I'm sure I'm not the only person that's had that feeling that's in one of these types of industries. So, what do you say to them? Like, how do you, convince them otherwise?
So that, first of all, is off script. So thank you for the hardball question. My mom's going to be watching this, and she's going to go, oh, no, Matt doesn't know what he's doing. No, it's an interesting question, and it is something that I encounter all the time. Basically, like I said, marketing is part science and part creativity. I can go in and look and see who is looking for these, asking these questions
right.
on Google, in trends and things like that. And I will typically go in armed with that and say, yeah, there's not 100,000 people looking for this or 1 million people looking for this like they are, the new Nike shoe or something like that. But there are 1,000 people, or there are 10 people a month, looking for debt collection software or whatever, whatever that long tail keyword is.
Right.
And if you're not ranking for that, how do you do that? You have to create content in order to rank for that, in order to be seen. Because at the end of the day, Google search, any of the other ones, aren't really search engines, they're answer engines. People don't go there because they want to search for something. They go there because they want to figure out a problem that they have. They want an answer to a problem. And at that point, that's why you put that out there. Because you don't need 1 million people to buy your piece of software in order to be successful. You need
right.
much, much less. Just because there's a lower volume of people searching doesn't mean that, you shouldn't do it.
Yeah, I think people nowadays with everything out, people have these exaggerated number, expectations, 1 million followers, 1 million likes,
Yeah.
1 million searches, and it gets in your head oh, if I'm only getting 10, that's not successful or
Right.
something like that.
But what if all 10 of those turn into
Right.
leads, and 3 of them become actual opportunities
Yep.
that turn into deals? That represents a better or a value to you, right? So,
Yeah.
I frequently, depending on the industry and depending on the keywords and everything like that, I encourage people, my clients, to not ignore the kind of core keywords that have a lot of search volume, but go after the longer tail keywords because they're easier to capture, and oftentimes they are more valuable because it's somebody searching for something very specific, and if it pertains to your business,
Right.
And they find you instead of your competitor, I think it's really powerful.
Yeah.
For sure. So they say that the ratio of creating to distributing should be you hear all the different percentages, 70-30, 60-40. What do you think is the best way to distribute the content, and how much time should you realistically spend on it?
So I think, unfortunately, in marketing, there is no best way to do anything because everybody's company is slightly different. Mm-hmm. I know that these are all my answers. It's it depends, but it really is what it is. It depends. It's a joke, especially amongst SEOs. It's every answer is it depends. But I think realistically, you need to spend the time on creating the content that is thoughtful, that is educational, that actually matters, and you should research. If you have the resources to do that SEO research, to do the, really a lot of it is just talking to your own customers. Because at one point they weren't a customer and they found you. Figure out where they found you and, what they thought you could have done better and what they thought you did really, really well. And just have those conversations. I think that's something that's lost in this modern era of marketing, is actually just having conversations with your customers. So I can't really say hey, spend 30% of the time creating or 70% of the time creating, and then the opposite. You just have to figure out what's going to work for you and go out there and execute it.
So obviously, talking about getting your content in front of people and everything like that, and making things clickable, and says we can't all be BuzzFeed, so everything we'll create can't be extremely clickable. So just what are the best ways to kind of consistently engage your audience? And on that, like talking about like BuzzFeed and things that are clickable, how bad is it to have something that is literally clickbait?
Right. Yeah. To trick somebody into opening an email or clicking on a Facebook post or clicking on a search result.
People do that to me all the time, and like salespeople just have started doing it,
Right.
and like it offends me. But I'm curious from your perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah. I agree. There's nothing worse than having a problem that you want solved, no matter how big or small the problem is. Turning to a search engine or turning, especially if it's an ad and you're paying something, you're literally paying me to click on it, and then if it's not doing what I need it to do, like, all right, well, I'm not going to do any business with you guys.
Right.
Now, I can't say that everybody is as vindictive as I am. I'm a little bit, I'm in the industry, so like I'm a little bit more, a little harsher of a judge. But I think people do notice that, and if it's something that isn't answering your question, you're not only not building that relationship, that trust, you're really risking future opportunities. And I mean, it just boils down to if you spend the time to create something good that actually answers the question that they're having, a lot of the time, most of the time, they're going to reward you with business. So creating lots of content that's clickable isn't really the idea.
Right.
The idea isn't to go viral and meet 1 million people. It's to meet those 1,000 people that are going to become customers and happy customers.
Well said. I think that trust is like you mentioned in there, having trust. Like if someone had clickbait, I mean, if I notice it's clickbait right away, like I instantly lose trust. How do I trust anything else that you tell me about what you're trying to sell me if you just lied to me to get me in the door?
Right.
So
you have such a finite amount of time to grab someone's interest. So I get it. Like I get that desire to want to get that click-through rate up, that open rate on an email up. But if it's not doing you any good, it's probably doing you harm. And then really, there's a difference between clickable. So clickable, I would look at as kind of an FYI. A KPI is, key performance indicator.
Right.
How many people actually became an opportunity? How many people became, if you had 1,000 clicks on something and only none of them became a customer, what's the point, right? So that's an FYI, and that's why I don't really look at clicks or open rate or anything like that as like the be-all end-all, because at the end of the day, marketing's job is to bring in opportunities for sales that turn into customers, right? So.
yeah. Well, thanks so much.
Thanks for
I
having me.
appreciate it, Matt. Thanks, Emily, for hosting with me.
Hope I could help you all.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in to Untraditional Industries. I appreciate it. Like, subscribe, and see you next time.